In 2019, stuck on a cramped 12-hour flight to Zambia, with all my friends asleep, I had one square box in front of me with a range of movies, so I dived in. I watched a few which were kind of mediocre, starting with Fantastic Beasts 2, a movie which has been criticised by many, but for me was a decent watch. I watched Walter Mitty as well, which was pretty good, but for some weird reason was a bit depressing and too surreal for me at the time. But what stood out the most was the deeply underrated Midnight in Paris, starring Owen Wilson, who for me is one of my favourite actors from childhood and now. Though what stuck with me the most was not the wilds Owen Wilson always manages to put into his acting, but the philosophy behind the movie, which feels in the modern day of 2020 so relevant, and is a philosophy which answers the struggles that all generations seem to have, no matter what the era. This struggle is the feeling that the generation which you're born into was the wrong one, that the music is rubbish, that there are no movements to get behind, that the art and the writing has lost its way, and if only you could go back just 10 years, then we would have a much better childhood, teenage years and 20s. This is a fallacy which me and my friends have engaged in many times, but indeed it is a fallacy, and watching Midnight in Paris every so often can be the eye-opener that is needed to remember just how precious our own generation is.
What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek?
In Midnight in Paris, we see Jill Pender, a successful screenwriter who feels he is sold out and has now become obsessed with writing a book in order to follow his original aspirations of being what he would say is a true writer. He's in love with Hemingway and especially Fitzgerald, and all those during the Roaring Twenties of Paris, which saw some of the most influential writing which has ever graced the English language, with such writers going on to inspire two of my favourite writers, Bukowski and Kerouac, and seemingly Jill Pender himself. We follow Jill as his wife, Inez, played by Rachel McAdams, continues to live a materialistic life as they'll explore Paris, often separately as Jill wants to take it all in and experience the wonders of the sea, whilst Inez would rather shop and go around with her ex and his wife to dinner in museums. This is another great thing about the movie. Within it has multiple areas which attack many people's lives. We have the connection between the wife and the husband who have clashing dreams, someone who's trying to fulfill a dream which they have always put back, and most importantly, the feeling of being lost in a generation. Though where the story has its excitement and meaning shown so noticeably is when Jill finds a way to go back in time each night to the 1920s by standing on a corner of a street where it's picked up by those of the past generation. In these nights we get to see Jill interact with his idols, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Dali and Gertrude Stein, who goes on to read his novel and helps him find his voice. Jill, each night, develops a new life in 1920s Paris, the time in which he wanted to be in his whole life, and he loves it. He even begins to develop a relationship with Adriana, one of Picasso's mistresses, as we the viewer even begin to root for their relationship. For these moments are fantastic. This may be because I feel the connection to Jill as an aspiring writer who loves the legends of 1920s Paris. When I visit Paris I got lost, not in the shops and the riches of the sea, but simply wandering around and taking it all in. I myself watching the movie begin to want to have the ability to experience all the great times and generations which appear so much better than mine. But this is not just a thing which happens in 1920s Paris. It's a side effect of any good movie, book or photography, which shows me a world which I cannot experience firsthand. It's the feeling that what I have is not better than what has already been, and is one which I feel we all do, and so too does Jill. But he has the ability and the gift to actually experience it. Though this thought is one which is echoed through many movies and forms of media, and is shown fantastically in Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. Dazed and Confused is a movie which I stumbled upon about a year ago, and happened to be the perfect time. It follows a bunch of school kids as the school year ends. We see those who are going to move into senior year next year, and the ritual of them going around and meeting on those coming into freshmen, reflecting the constant change in a teenager's life, which goes all so fast. But what's so brilliant about this movie is that it follows a character for just one whole day. There is no crazy event which makes you feel that the movie is pure fantasy. Instead, they go out with their friends, as the boys try to get the girls and the girls mess with the boys. The young kids try and get with the older kids, and at the end, we see them in a field drinking beers and partying because the house party got shut down before it even started. It follows the events which happen in all teenagers' lives, no matter what generation. This gives an underlying message throughout the movie, that at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all teenagers, and we all do the same stuff. Just that stuff may have been done with different haircuts, different clothes and varying music, but it doesn't mean it is not the same. And what Linklater does so well to truly showcase this, and what Woody Allen does too in Midnight in Paris, is have the characters reflect the same feeling of nostalgia that was never had but is given to something we believe to be so much better than our own. It's almost as if Linklater is mocking the audience as the characters themselves, being teenagers in the late 1970s, have the dream that people today would kill for. but feel that the good generation skips every 10 years, believing that the 60s were the best and perhaps the 80s will be better than their own, as they are stuck in the 70s, which would end up being remembered as one of the best generations in human history. This is what's so perfect about the movie. It creates a self-comment about how we feel about the movie within the movie. When I watched, I agreed with everything it said about the characters feeling their generation is the wrong one for them, not because they believed the 70s was bad, but because it's how I felt about my own, therefore making me sit there, wanting to be in the 70s whilst agreeing with the people who were in the 70s that I wish they weren't. The perfect commentary on why everyone is a pessimist about their own generation. This is a lesson which has really come about in modern times, as people have had the ability to reflect on the past more than they ever have before. It's a philosophical idea which I do not know the name of, but the feeling that surrounded it is more than true. It is one which I have to constantly remind myself of, and movies like Midnight in Paris do it so perfectly. Though Midnight in Paris takes us a step further in a less nuanced way. At the end of the film, Gil shows Adriana that he is from the future, and she has to go back to another generation with him. She chooses the 1890s, and Jill is surprised. He asks her why, and she says that this is the golden generation of Paris, and she chooses not to leave, which causes Gil to realise the fundamental idea that nostalgia can get to anyone, causing them to ignore their time and lose that opportunity. Gil and the audience are taught the lesson that everyone has a golden age, and that is often not the age that they have experienced or ever truly known. This lesson is to stop looking back into the past for experiences, and make experiences which people will look back on like you look back on theirs.